Hey guys, tonight we step into the glow of a charcoal forge. The air is so thick with smoke and sparks that your eyes water and your nose stings before you even lift the hammer. You stand in a cramped wooden shed near the edge of a muddy village, clutching a rough iron rod that still smells like ore ripped straight from the mountain. You shoo it away with a puff of air from the bellows, joking to yourself that maybe roasted chicken would sell better than your first axe. You brace for that possibility, tapping the cooled blade along the anvil edge to check for cracks. The sound rings true enough. You still need to attach a wooden haft, sand the edge, and balance the weight. But at least this one will not snap like a brittle biscuit. A villager steps forward, offering a handful of grain as payment. It is not exactly gold, but food keeps you alive long enough to swing the hammer tomorrow. The humor is thin, but it keeps your arms moving when the iron starts to fight you. You do not have any space rocks handy, just a few bags of charcoal and some stubborn iron. No one claps or sings your praise, but a few nods and a grunt of approval tell you everything you need to know. You have cleared the first hurdle. Tomorrow, they will bring plowshares with cracked edges, kitchen knives dulled to useless nubs, and maybe even whispers about making something sharper, longer, and far deadlier than an axe. If you can keep your hands steady and your fire hot, this forge could turn from a smoky shack into the beating heart of the entire village. For now, you let the fire die down, muscles aching, ears still ringing from the hammer blows, and you wonder if the next thing you make will keep someone fed or help someone take a life. But part of you wonders if you should start collecting strange materials just to keep customers curious. Anything to get them talking, because a smith who draws crowds gets contracts, and contracts mean survival. After several cycles of heating, striking, and quenching, you plunge the rough blade into a bucket of water. The hiss is sharp, steam billowing up, and a few kids cheer as if you just forged a legendary sword. Every clang rings sharp against your ears and rattles your arms, while the villagers outside murmur like a jury, waiting to see if you can even make a blade without turning it into an ugly hunk of scrap. The fire roars hotter as you pump the bellows, sweat soaking your back even though the sun has barely risen. You probably will not last long in this heat without gulping water, but if you can shape this rod into something useful, you might just convince the skeptical farmers that you are more than another wanderer chasing work. The village needs tools first, not weapons. You slam the glowing metal against the anvil, the impact sending a tremor up your arm, and watch flakes of scale fall like black snow. The goal is a simple axe, sturdy enough to chop firewood and light enough for a farmer to swing all day. One wrong angle and the blade will warp, which means another hour of heating and hammering. You keep the rhythm steady, letting the hiss of the fire blend with your pounding until it almost lulls you into a trance. Historians still argue whether small rural forges like this were entirely self-taught or if they drew on traveling guilds for training. But either way, every strike feels like you are writing your reputation in steel. To break the tension, a chicken wanders in through the half-open door, squawking at the sparks like it owns the place. The truth is less glamorous. Early Chinese smiths often worked with pig iron that needed careful tempering, and sometimes the first few blades shattered under stress testing. Quirky stories about this era say some blacksmiths added animal bones or even fragments of meteorite to their smelting process, believing it made the metal stronger or gave it divine favor. As you lean the finished axe against the wall, the villagers study your sweat-streaked face. The forge hums like a restless animal, its glow no longer just for your hands but for every pair of eyes in the village. Smoke curls up and out through the gaps in the roof as the clang of metal carries past the rice paddies, pulling in neighbors who would normally ignore another laborer sweating by the fire. Now they line up with broken plowshares, chipped knives, and requests for tools that will make the next harvest less backbreaking. You feel the shift when a farmer, usually too frugal to part with a grain, offers an actual bundle of millet for a sharpened sickle. Staying rooted in one place, as you are now, can make you both invaluable and vulnerable. One lean farmer leans close as he pays, muttering that a sharp sword might be worth 10 sickles if the warlord's scouts arrive soon. You do not answer, just let the rhythmic hammering fill the silence. A smith's reputation can rise fast, but so can the danger when that reputation draws the wrong kind of orders. You glance at the embers, knowing they might soon be stoked, not for farming tools, but for something meant to spill blood. For now, you focus on the rhythm, on keeping every edge true, and on making sure the forge keeps humming without tipping into a place that will burn you in more ways than one. You sharpen a series of hoes and attach wooden handles while considering that reality. Each finished tool earns you grain, dried fish, or on rare occasions a few copper coins, and each clang of the hammer reinforces your place as more than a transient worker. Payment is getting more serious, and so is your workload. Every spark seems to draw more business. Some of the women hover near the doorway, curious about how the iron glows bright enough to turn night into day. A few older men debate whether this much hammering will wake the ancestors, a superstition that claims excessive noise near the shrine could anger spirits. You overhear gossip about warlords amassing troops in the next province, and you file it away because more soldiers means more demand for steel. Someone jokes that you should start charging admission for the animals since your forge has become their meeting hall too. The laughter helps ease the monotony, but it also reminds you that your skill is drawing a small crowd, and crowds draw attention from people you might not want watching. One kid even brings you a rusted spearhead found near the riverbank, asking if you can make it new again. You take it more for goodwill than profit, since restoring relics like this can earn you trust. And trust is a form of currency in a world where coinage is still inconsistent. Historians still argue whether rural smiths often doubled as minor ritual figures to soothe such fears. But tonight you are content to nod politely and keep striking. A joke about the ancestors probably needing sharper hoes to till their ghostly fields earns a laugh and softens the tension. Your forge is more than a workplace now. It is a gathering spot, a makeshift market, and a place where news travels fast. In a lighter moment, a stray dog trots in and curls up by the anvil, seemingly immune to the noise. Factually, many Three Kingdoms villages relied on traveling smiths who would set up temporary forges and then move on once the work was done. Still, whispers begin that some men want weapons, not just plowshares. The first soldiers arrive at dusk, their boots leaving deep prints in the wet soil as they march straight to your forge. Their armor is patched and dented, the kind that says they have seen more ambush than drills, and their leader carries a spear whose tip has been broken clean off. He drops it on your anvil without asking, the clang drawing every villager's eyes to you. The soldiers want more than repairs. They want new spearheads, stacks of arrowheads, and at least a dozen short swords. They offer payment in silver ingots, a rarity for someone who has mostly been bartering with grain and dried fish. He runs a thumb along the edge of one spearhead and nods in satisfaction. "Keep working," he mutters, placing another small stack of silver on the anvil. That weight is heavier than any hammer blow, because now you know you are no longer just a village smith. You are feeding an army one weapon at a time, and armies attract attention from rivals, spies, and worse. You glance at the glowing coals, realizing each one could forge your fortune or light the fuse of your destruction, and you wonder if tomorrow's orders will be even bloodier. The weight of that silver in your hand feels like both opportunity and a rope tightening around your neck. The forge becomes louder than ever. Each hammer blow now echoes with the thought that these weapons will not hang on a wall. They will meet flesh, wood, and bone. A few even comment on your technique, asking if you know how to harden a blade with clay tempering, a method rumored to make edges sharper without snapping. You admit you have only heard whispers of it, mostly from traveling smiths who vanish as quickly as they arrive. One soldier claims he saw a sword from a distant province that could slice through a helmet, though whether that was truth or tavern exaggeration, you cannot tell. Historians still argue whether village smiths like you could refuse such orders without risking punishment. You smirk and tell him that if he wants a job, you can pay him in scrap iron, which earns a round of laughter and breaks the stiffness in the air. Even with the humor, your back aches and your ears ring as you shape the first batch of spearheads. But judging by the way these soldiers watch your every move, you suspect refusal is not an option. You agree to the commission, though you make a half joke that you charge extra if their swords break mid-battle. The leader cracks a grin, the kind of smile that suggests he would rather pay you than bury you, and that is enough to keep your hands steady. The soldiers linger around the forge as you work, eating your dried fish and scaring off the curious children. To lighten the tension, one of the younger recruits picks up your bellows and pretends it is a musical instrument, wheezing out an awful rhythm while his comrades chuckle. By nightfall, the leader returns to inspect your progress. The morning fog clings to the trees as you meet a man older than the cracked stones outside your forge. His beard is streaked with white and soot, and his fingers are calloused to the point they look like they are carved from wood. He introduces himself only as Master Ling, a smith who claims to have worked for 3 different warlords. To cut the tension, you quip that maybe you should also throw in your leftover chicken bones to make the weapons divine. Ling chuckles, a dry sound, and says some smiths actually do grind bone into powder for certain finishes, believing it prevents brittleness. He tells you to build a false stash of scrap metal and hide your true stock, because a smith who knows too much is as much a target as a soldier carrying gold. You glance at the glowing coals, realizing that with each strike, your life is no longer measured just by the silver on the anvil, but by how many shadows start watching your every move. The oddness of it lingers in your mind as you agree to his terms, because a stronger blade might mean the difference between a pile of silver and a shallow grave, and survived each change of power by knowing how to keep secrets and make steel sing. The metal sings at a slightly higher pitch when struck. A tone Liang claims tells you the layers are fusing correctly. Your arms burn from the repetition and the smoke stings your eyes. But when you clinch the first completed blade and test its edge against a strip of dried bamboo, it slices cleanly without a crack or warp. Even the stray dog by your forge lifts its head at the sharp sound. He watches you hammer a glowing billet and shakes his head slowly, muttering that your iron will chip after a few hard strikes, unless you learn the art of blending metals. Liang shows you a small ingot that glints differently from anything you have seen. It is not pure iron, not the brittle pig iron you normally temper, but something richer, harder, and oddly flexible when reheated. He calls it a special bronze steel mixture, a guarded formula said to have been traded along merchant routes from distant regions. Historians still argue whether such advanced alloys reach rural forges in the Three Kingdoms era, or if these stories are mostly romantic exaggerations. But the weight of the ingot feels real enough. Liang offers to teach you how to create it, but his price is steep. Half of every weapon you make for the next season goes directly to him, and he wants no arguments when he collects. You study his lined face as he speaks, wondering if this is mentorship or extortion disguised as wisdom. Over the next hours, he teaches you the delicate balance of heating, folding, and hammering thin layers of this alloy. Liang leans close and warns you that others will hear about this new quality soon. And when they do, your forge will not only attract eager customers, but also thieves, spies, and rivals willing to slit a throat to control the secret. Night drapes over the village as you notice a figure lingering by the edge of your forge's glow. He does not approach, only watches, his face hidden beneath a wide straw hat. Nothing is missing, but your stock of charcoal and the ingots you have been preparing with Master Liang's alloy have been rearranged. But as you stoke the morning fire, you cannot shake the image of that hat-shrouded figure. nor the possibility that someone might be planning to take your knowledge, your work, and possibly your life if it comes to that. Liang advises you to create decoys, rusted swords, cracked blades, and fake molds, so anyone who breaks in leaves, thinking you are just another mediocre smith with nothing worth killing for. Some say they are scouts for a rival lord, others swear they saw the gleam of a foreign helmet in the moonlight. Whatever the truth, the forge feels less like a hub of progress and more like a target painted bright against the dark. You work with your back to the wall now, the hammer steady, but your eyes always scanning the doorway, wondering if tonight's sparks will be the beacon that brings trouble to your door. He also suggests you forge a few intentionally flawed weapons to sell cheaply to make rivals underestimate your true output. The irony of making bad swords on purpose for safety is not lost on you, and you joke to Liang that maybe you should also hang a sign saying, "No secrets here," to keep spies away. He only smirks and reminds you that anyone who survives long in this trade learns to be as much a trickster as a craftsman. Someone was looking, not stealing, which feels more dangerous. Historians still argue whether organized spies regularly targeted village smiths during the Three Kingdoms era, or if most incidents were just local thieves sniffing out value. But you suspect this is more than random theft. Whoever that figure was, they were searching for the secret metal that Liang warned about. You keep working, striking the red-hot blade into shape, but your eyes flick toward him between hammer blows. The dog that has claimed a corner of your forge growls softly, hackles raised. When you finally quench the blade and glance back, the stranger is gone, leaving only faint boot prints in the dirt near the tree line. The next morning, you find one of your storage sheds forced open. To break the tension, you mutter to the dog that at least whoever snooped around had the courtesy to stack the ingots neatly, earning yourself a half laugh at your own nerves. You start locking your tools inside the forge at night and burying the most precious ingots beneath a pile of worthless scrap. By the week's end, villagers whisper about seeing shadowy figures moving along the forest path at night. The summons comes at midday, carried by a mounted courier whose armor gleams cleaner than any soldier you have seen. He dismounts, unrolls a scroll sealed with red wax, and announces that General Wei, a commander serving a rising warlord, has heard of your work. The road to the garrison is lined with patrols, each soldier's eyes flicking toward the tools on your cart, measuring your worth as if you were another piece of cargo. You keep your head down, though you make a wry comment to your dog that at least no one will steal you while you are this heavily guarded. He turns to his officers, nods once, and declares that you will be relocated inside the garrison to produce weapons for his troops. One officer actually laughs, though quickly stifles it under Wei's stern gaze. And the crackle of your forge's fire still glowing in the yard. You realize this is not a promotion so much as a transfer of chains. Your skill has made you valuable, but now, under the watchful eyes of General Wei's men, it may also make you a prisoner to your own talent. The humor is thin, but it keeps your hands steady as you set up your tools in a new forge, one far larger than your village shack. The fire roars hotter here, fed by endless charcoal, and soldiers already line up with broken swords, dulled spears, and requests for new batches of arrowheads. Payment will come in silver and grain, but you will be watched constantly, and any failure will not be forgiven. His tone carries the weight of both opportunity and threat. The dog yawns, unimpressed, as the miles grind by beneath your feet. The general demands your presence at the provincial garrison by the week's end. Refusal is not written as an option. The villagers gather, murmuring as if you have been chosen for execution, though a few clap you on the back and whisper that this could mean silver beyond imagining. You pack what you can carry, your finest hammers, tongs, and a small crate of Master Liang's alloy hidden beneath sacks of scrap. When you arrive, the garrison feels like another world. Rows of barracks stretch along the walls, banners snapping in the wind, and the clang of training weapons echoes from the yard. General Wei himself is a towering figure, his armor etched with patterns of dragons and clouds, the kind of ornate work only a court smith could craft. He watches as you present a blade forged from Lang's alloy, running a gloved finger along its edge. Without a word, he slashes through a bundled stack of bamboo in one motion. The blade holds. Historians still argue whether provincial generals personally tested their smiths or left such tasks to subordinates, but Wei's direct involvement makes your stomach knot. To ease the tension, you quip that at least in the garrison, you will not have to chase chickens away from the forge anymore. As night falls, you lie awake on a straw mat in your assigned quarters, listening to the distant cadence of marching drills. The clamor of the garrison fades for one morning as General Wei summons you to a courtyard ringed with banners. 2 forges have been built side by side, each one blazing hot, bellows wheezing under the pull of soldiers. His movements are practiced, efficient, the kind that come from muscle memory rather than thought. To break the tension, you mutter to a nearby soldier that at least neither of you has to race a chicken to the finish line. A callback that earns a quiet chuckle despite the rigid atmosphere. Then you focus, drawing on Master Lang's alloy, heating and folding thin layers until your shoulders ache. Across from you stands another smith, older, broader, with scars on his forearms that suggest years of hammering and perhaps a few blade accidents. Some whisper that your alloy gives you an edge. Others claim your rival has a secret quenching technique involving rice wine. He swings yours through a bundle of reeds. It slices clean with barely a tremor. The rival smith bows stiffly, his face tight but controlled, before gathering his tools and leaving without a word. You want to relax, maybe even celebrate, but Wei's officers quickly usher you back to the forge. Winning means more than glory, it means endless work and no excuse for failure. As you stoke the fires again, you realize that in the 3 kingdoms, success often feels like a heavier burden than defeat. The rival's sword chips slightly at the tip during the same test, a flaw so small most men would not notice, but Wei notices everything. And saltwater, a rumor that may or may not be tavern talk. Historians still argue whether smithing contests like this were truly common or more ceremonial displays. But today feels anything but ceremonial as sweat stings your eyes, and each strike feels heavier than the last. The general announces a contest. Each of you must forge a sword within a day. The winner earns the official contract to supply Wei's personal guard. The loser can return to village work if he is lucky. You size up your rival as you pump the bellows. The day becomes a blur of heat and hammer strikes. Soldiers gather around, betting grain and coins on who will finish first. By evening, 2 swords rest on the inspection table. General Wei lifts each one, testing their balance and weight. The courtyard falls silent as the general places your sword back on the table and declares you the victor. The forge no longer feels like yours. It is a beast that consumes every waking hour, fed by endless carts of charcoal and iron. Soldiers no longer bring just swords or spears. They bring orders for hundreds of arrowheads, dozens of maces. Historians still argue whether such mass production was common outside major state armories or if field forges like yours were exceptions, but the piles of finished weapons growing beside you feel undeniable. You organize the work into stages. One crew heats and draws out the raw billets. Another shapes points, a third sharpens, while you personally inspect each finished batch. Fires burn in neat rows, sparks shoot skyward, and the clang of hammers becomes a rhythm that echoes beyond the garrison walls. It is a machine, one that demands your skill and your stamina, but also one that might grant you a kind of power. Every arrowhead and blade stamped with your mark ties you closer to General Wei's campaigns, for better or worse. If his armies win, your name could spread beyond this province. If they lose, your skill might be buried alongside the soldiers who carry your work. You work under the stars, wondering if your hands will ever stop vibrating from the constant striking. Even the dog, now more a fixture than a companion, lies curled in the soot, too tired to bark. Mistakes are costly. One poorly forged blade could snap in battle, and Wei's punishment for failure is rumored to be more painful than the forge's flames. And stacks of spare spear tips that must be ready before the next campaign. General Wei's officers stand by with scrolls, barking counts, and deadlines, while new laborers haul fuel and pump the bellows. You have become less a lone craftsman and more a commander of fire and steel, directing assistants to hammer, quench, and polish in shifts. The scale of it feels overwhelming at first. Your small village forge could never match this pace, and now you are expected to triple output without sacrificing quality. In a rare moment of levity, one of your assistants accidentally drops a glowing arrowhead into a barrel of rice wine instead of water. The hiss is spectacular, and the smell sends the soldiers laughing, claiming they will drink it anyway for extra courage. You quip that if they start breathing smoke after, it is not your fault. The laughter lightens the tension, even as your arms ache from checking every spear tip with the precision of a surgeon. By night, the forge yard looks like a strange festival. As you inspect the final row of weapons, you realize the forge has become something bigger than a workshop. Amid the chaos of forging for the army, a different figure arrives at the garrison, one draped in long silk robes, his belt lined with tiny brass molds and coin dies. He is not a soldier, but a mint worker, a craftsman responsible for casting coins for the provincial treasury. Rows of clay molds lie drying on racks, and in the corner, a crucible glows faintly with molten copper and tin. He hints that with your skill, you could craft luxury fittings, belt buckles, ornamented knife hilts, even ceremonial weapons, items that generals and merchants pay far more for than they do for standard steel. You joke that maybe you should start stamping your own face on coins if it pays better, earning a rare grin from Chun as he ladles another pour into the molds. He explains how each mold is lined with precise stamps to create coins marked with the sigil of Wei's warlord. If weapons can bring you power, perhaps coinwork and ornamentation can bring you freedom. You imagine a future where your mark is not only on swords, but also on the very coins used to pay the armies wielding them. Still, you cannot ignore the risk. Warlords have executed men for minting unauthorized coins, and whispers about counterfeiters vanishing in the night are common. The decision looms like a glowing ingot in your tongs. Forge it carefully or let it drop and shatter your future. Historians still argue whether local forges like yours were ever folded into minting operations, or if such crafts stayed tightly controlled by the state. But Chun seems unbothered by the legality. To him, coin is just another product, one far less likely to shatter in battle. His name is Chun, and he watches you hammer out another row of spearheads before smirking that you are wasting your talent on weapons, when there is real profit in shaping the currency of warlords. Chun invites you to his quarters that evening, where he unveils a small traveling mint. As he demonstrates how to pour and cool the metal, he slips you a palm-sized ingot made of a copper-silver blend, whispering that it could fetch 10 times the grain you earn from a single sword. By the time you return to the forge, your head buzzes with new ideas. The knock on your door comes just after midnight. 2 men in dark robes slip inside without waiting for an answer, their faces shadowed by hoods. They do not bother with pleasantries. Historians still argue whether black market smithing was as common as the records suggest, or if most accounts are later exaggerations, but the threat feels real as the men wait for your answer. Liang's alloy would make the weapons exceptional, but it would also make them traceable if Wei's officers inspect the blades. If you refuse, you risk angering men who clearly have no fear of spilling blood. You weigh the options as the forge fire flickers low, the shadows from the men's hoods stretching long across the walls. To break the tension, you mutter that you should at least get a free cloak with the deal if you am risking your head. The men nod, drop another pouch of gold on the bench, and vanish into the night as silently as they entered. You sit by the fire, staring at the coins, knowing that you have just stepped into a world where one misstep could mean a shallow grave. Even the dog, usually snoring by the anvil, lifts its head and growls softly, as if sensing that the forge has become something darker than steel and flame. The taller one smirks, but does not laugh, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a dagger that looks far too sharp for comfort. One drops a pouch of gold coins onto your workbench, the clinking sound louder than the wind outside. The other leans close and murmurs that a rival lord requires a discreet shipment of blades, no markings, no records, and no questions. The gold is yours if you agree, but so is the risk of being branded a traitor should General Wei ever discover the deal. You study the pouch, its weight heavy enough to change your life, but also to end it. If you accept, you must forage in secret at night, using scraps and hidden stockpiles while your official work continues by day. Finally, you agree to craft a small batch, no more than a dozen blades, under the condition that they handle the transport and leave no trace in your forge. The attack comes before dawn, long before the garrison stirs. You wake to the sound of distant horns and the sudden thud of arrows striking the walls. Lang's alloy ingots and your master molds are hidden under a false floor in the forge, but if the raiders find them, your advantage and perhaps your life are gone. You duck behind a stack of spear shafts, using the rising smoke as cover, and begin prying up the boards to reach your hidden stash. And your survival now hinges not just on skill, but on how well you can vanish when the world around you ignites. A soldier stumbles near you, bleeding from a gash on his arm, begging for a blade. You press a half-finished sword into his hand, quipping that it might not win a contest, but could at least scare someone off. Even in chaos, a wry comment keeps your hands moving. Flames erupt near the storage sheds, and the air fills with smoke and the screams of startled soldiers. But watching the raiders methodically strip every usable item, you suspect this is more than chance. They know exactly what they want. You manage to haul the hidden ingots into a burlap sack, slinging it over your shoulder as arrows hiss past. The forge itself is already catching fire, the roof snapping and spitting embers into the dark. You grab your hammer not as a weapon, but as the one thing your hands know how to wield, and rush toward the forge to see the latches on your doors already shattered. Raiders in mismatched armor swarm the yard, prying open crates of weapons and dragging bundles of charcoal into waiting carts. Your instinct is not to fight, but to salvage what matters. Historians still argue whether field raids like this were random strikes or orchestrated attempts to cripple enemy supply lines. With the dog at your heels, you sprint toward the rear gate, slipping through a gap as the defenders rally near the main yard. The clang of weapons and the crackle of fire chase you into the trees, where you pause only long enough to bury the ingots beneath a foam log, covering them with leaves. If the garrison survives, you can retrieve them later. If it falls, at least the one secret you carry will not be looted along with everything else. As you crouch in the shadows, the sky turning faintly gray with dawn, you realize your forge is gone, your place in the garrison uncertain. When the smoke clears and the garrison limps back to order, General Wei does not dismiss you. Instead, he summons you to the central hall, a room thick with incense and lined with banners scorched at the edges from the raid. Rows of anvils, bellows, and quenching vats stretch across the yard, each crew working under your supervision. Your old tools are locked away, replaced by finely balanced hammers and chisels provided by the state. The arsenal runs like a living creature, its fires glowing deep into the night, smoke rising in pillars visible from beyond the city gates. You lie awake on your cot, staring at the beams above, realizing that you are no longer just shaping metal, you are shaping an army's future, and any failure could see you replaced as easily as a cracked anvil. You walk the line each morning, correcting grips, checking temperatures, and ensuring that the alloy techniques you learned from Liang are passed down carefully but not shared beyond trusted foremen. Historians still argue whether such arsenals produced weapons by rote or allowed master smiths to influence quality. But here your mark is on every blade whether you swing the hammer or not. His voice is low but firm as he declares you too valuable to remain a simple smith. From now on, you will serve as a superintendent of the arsenal within the city walls, overseeing dozens of forges and hundreds of workers. It is both a promotion and a sentence. You will have authority, but also no escape from the endless work. The city arsenal feels more like a miniature kingdom than a workshop. At midday, inspectors arrive to tally the day's production, their wax tablets filling with numbers that will determine whether you sleep in your quarters or under a punishment post. You keep the crews working in shifts to avoid mistakes, joking to one group that their hammer rhythm sounds more like a festival drumline than a forge. The laugh ripples through the yard, breaking some of the tension, though no one dares slow their pace. By nightfall, your muscles ache not from hammering, but from pacing and pointing, from managing men who are blacksmiths, farmers, or even criminals pressed into labor. Your new post brings more than long hours and endless inspections. It brings experiments. One evening, an officer delivers an unusual request from General Wei himself. Creating something mobile feels almost absurd. Your entire craft is built on permanence, on heavy stones and brick hearths that hold heat for days. To ease your own frustration, you joke to your assistants that maybe you should just train a few oxen to blow the bellows while walking, turning the whole thing into a parade float of fire. The laugh helps, but the task remains daunting. The army is preparing for a campaign deep into enemy territory, where supply lines will be stretched thin. Wei wants you to design a forge that can be disassembled, loaded onto wagons, and reassembled in the field so his troops never run short of weapons or repairs. A traveling forge, light enough to move, yet sturdy enough to withstand the chaos of war. You study the yard, measuring the size of the bellows, the weight of the anvils, and the space a full coal pit consumes. Historians still argue whether mobile forges were truly common during the Three Kingdoms era, or if most armies relied on scavenged local forges. What you attempt now might be closer to innovation than tradition. You commission a pair of reinforced iron plates as a portable hearth, collapsible bellows made of layered leather, and a lightweight anvil that can be wedged into the ground for stability. You realize that each one will carry your signature work into battle, far beyond the reach of the city walls, tying your name not just to the weapons, but to the survival of the army itself. The design feels fragile compared to your fixed forge, but the officers insist speed matters more than comfort. After weeks of testing, the first trial run comes at dawn. The forge is packed onto 2 wagons, hauled beyond the city walls, and reassembled beside a quiet stretch of road. The fire catches, the bellows hold, and your hammer rings out against the small anvil as a proof of concept. Soldiers gather, marveling that such a contraption can work. You quip that if the campaign fails, you can always rent it out as a traveling roadside smithy for farmers. As the sun sets, General Wei inspects the mobile forge and gives a rare nod of approval. He orders 3 more built before the campaign begins. The next shipment of materials brings something unfamiliar. Bars of steel from distant merchants, marked with stamps and a script you cannot read. The metal has a cleaner ring when struck and a smoother grain when filed. The hammer strikes feel different too, as if the steel resists less but retains its shape more firmly. One of your assistants jokes that maybe the merchants hid magic in the bars, and you deadpan that if it bursts into song mid-strike, you are leaving the forge and never coming back. He orders more of this foreign steel, no matter the cost, and commands you to train your foreman in the hybrid method. You realize that your forge has now tied you to merchants, armies, and secrets that stretch beyond the borders of any single lord's rule. Each spark from the anvil feels like it carries whispers from across continents, binding your future to wars and deals far larger than the city walls can contain. The laugh cuts through the long night as you experiment with folding the steel into layered blades. An officer explains that these traders came from far to the west, crossing deserts and mountains, selling a steel that some claim is superior to anything smelted in the provinces. General Wei wants you to test it, to see if it can forge blades that will last longer and cut cleaner than the alloy you learned from Liang. You heat a bar until it glows white, noticing it holds temperature more evenly than your usual stock. Historians still argue whether high-quality foreign steel truly entered widespread use during the Three Kingdoms, or if such tales are the result of later embellishment. But as you quench the first finished blade and watch it shear through a thick rod of bamboo without a nick, you suspect there is more truth than legend here. The first dozen swords forged from it gleam brighter, their edges almost too sharp to touch. Soldiers whisper that whoever wields them will be untouchable in battle. To keep morale high, you quip that they should avoid trimming their beards with them unless they want to lose a chin. Even Liang, when he visits to inspect your work, whistles softly and mutters that the steel could change the balance of power if Wei's army equips enough soldiers with it. You decide to blend it with your existing alloy, creating a hybrid metal that feels lighter but bites deeper on every cut. As General Wei inspects the batch, his expression softens, not quite a smile, but close. The arsenal quiets as winter settles over the city, the clang of hammers fading into the slow rhythm of routine. You stand by the forge one evening, the fire burning low, staring at the reflection of your scarred hands in a bucket of water. You recall the strange merchants, the mint master Chun, the shadowed figures who bought unmarked blades, and the foreign steel that whispers of distant lands. Every strike of your hammer has tied you deeper into currents far beyond your control. Historians still argue whether smiths like you were remembered as heroes, profiteers, or mere tools of war. Standing in the flickering glow, you suspect the truth is somewhere in between. Silver coins and food stores pile higher than you ever imagined, yet the weight on your shoulders feels heavier than when you were a village smith. You are no longer the man who fixed plowshares for grain. You are the one whose work shapes battles, tips scales, and draws the eyes of warlords and spies alike. You think about the villagers who once watched you forge your first axe, about the dog that still curls beside the anvil, older now, its muzzle gray from soot and time. A younger apprentice asks if it was worth it, all the late nights, the secret deals, the fear of the wrong blade breaking or the wrong person finding your stash. You tell him with a dry chuckle that a full belly and a warm fire make most dangers feel smaller, but even you are not sure if you believe the words. The arsenal hums gently in the distance, but here in your corner everything slows. You sit on a worn stool, rubbing your palms together, and let yourself breathe. Tomorrow, there will be more orders, more blades, more sparks leaping into the night. But for now, you let the warmth ease your muscles, the rhythm of the quiet fill your thoughts, and you close your eyes, knowing the world will turn whether you hammer or rest. The forge crackles softly, a sound like distant applause or distant warning, and you let the silence stretch. As the night deepens, you douse the coals, the glow fading to soft embers. The forge grows still as the last embers fade, their soft glow casting long shadows that stretch and sway across the quiet workshop. The clamor of soldiers, the weight of orders, and the endless hum of the arsenal all drift into the distance, leaving only the faint scent of charcoal and metal in the cooling air. The dog beside you shifts in its sleep, sighing, a small comfort in a world that rarely offers any. You let your thoughts drift not to the swords, the secrets, or the merchants, but to the simple feel of the heat against your fingers and the sound of the wind threading through the yard. You ease back on the stool, your breathing deep and slow, feeling the ache in your arms soften as the warmth from the dying coals lingers against your skin. Outside, the winter wind brushes softly against the wooden shutters, a muted rhythm that matches the calm thud of your heartbeat. Your eyelids grow heavier as the shadows lengthen, every sound distant now, softened like a memory. The crackle of the coals fades to a faint hiss, a whisper that feels more like a lullaby than a warning. Only the soft glow of a dying forge, the gentle sigh of wind, and the steady, calming rhythm of a world briefly at peace. You let your head rest back, your breathing match the soft hush of the night, and you allow yourself to slip into the quiet, warm dark of sleep. Each breath draws you deeper into calm, the tension in your shoulders releasing like cooled metal. For tonight, there is no war, no contracts, no weight beyond the slow rise and fall of your chest.